Alright, today we have another guide for rough play in the bedroom, talking about face slapping. You're going to learn how to safely and effectively slap your partner in the face during sex to increase pleasure and polarize your power play. I'm Brandon the Dom, let's dive in. Now, face slapping is an activity that pushes the edges of play. It carries some risk and can invoke a lot of negative associations with domestic abuse, making it off-putting for some. However, when it's executed with care, a well-placed face slap can be quite a thrill for both the dominant and submissive. For the submissive, it can be a powerful way to experience humiliation and pain, while for the dominant, it's an excellent way to exert control and command attention really quickly. So let's walk through how to properly and safely slap someone in the face so that it enhances pleasure while avoiding injury to their beautiful face. First, let's discuss why people even enjoy being slapped in the face during sex. While it may not be everyone's cup of tea, there are plenty of people that do enjoy this. And some reasons for that is one, the dynamic of pain and pleasure, which is one of the cornerstones of BDSM. It basically helps you to create this symphony of sensations and emotions during a particular scene. Because the face is highly sensitive, even a light slap can create a sharp sting that some are going to find intensely pleasurable. As I mentioned earlier, it can also play into degradation or humiliation. Outside of the BDSM context, a face slap is often associated with emotions of anger, disgust, or disappointment. And because of those associated emotions, it can sometimes make a face slap feel degrading or humiliating, which are going to heighten those aspects of submission for that person. Face slapping is also an integral part of rough sex or rough body play, and may be one of a dozen other things that you could be doing, some of which I've created videos for on this channel, like spanking, manhandling, or choking. And of course, it's an expression of dominance and submission. When you are in a power dynamic, a face slap can be a quick action to reinforce dominance. It brings the submissive's full attention quickly to the dominant and shows that they have control over her. Of course, whatever draws you to face slapping, it's helpful to explore your own erotic mind, to figure out your own reasons and fantasies. And I also have a video for that to help you discover your turn-ons. So I'll leave a link for that down below. Now that we understand the why, let's talk about some of the risks. Face slapping is a little more risky than some of the other rough sex techniques that we've talked about on this channel. And that's due to the number of vital structures in the face. So here's some things to be aware of. The first is if you aim incorrectly and you hit the ear, you can perforate the eardrum. And this happens when you strike and you force a bunch of air quickly into the eardrum, and it creates a sudden pressure spike that can damage a lot of the fragile structures in the eardrum. And this will lead to severe pain, temporary or permanent hearing loss, and other potential long-term implications for the ear. So my advice is to avoid hitting the ear entirely. Another risk is a dislocated jaw. So if the submissive's mouth is open when you hit it and you hit near that jaw area, the force, depending on how hard you hit, can actually misalign the jaw, which could cause pain or dislocation. So to prevent this, make sure that your submissive's mouth is closed, or that their jaw is just lightly clenched, a little pressure, and allow their head to basically move with the slap. So that way it's not a hard pressure up against that jaw. The other risk with their mouth being open is you can chip a tooth if you're not aiming very well. Again, keeping the mouth closed is going to minimize that risk. The other place that if you have poor aim and you're aiming too high is you could hit the eye in some way, or if you're swiping across, you can scratch the eye, which would cause severe damage and could lead to vision loss. The next risk to consider is bruising and swelling. So depending on the force and frequency at which you're placing your face slaps, there can be some localized bruising, swelling, or you can actually lead tiny little red dots when blood vessels are basically popping from being hit with a lot of force. And then of course, there's also head injury. Although this is more rare, a forceful slap could lead to mild head injury. So you want to make sure that if they're experiencing any symptoms like double vision, nausea, confusion, or getting a really bad headache, this could indicate there's a more serious injury going on and should be addressed. If any of these things occur that I've listed, I advise that you actually seek medical attention for these, because a lot of these risks, if they're left unattended, can result in pain, loss of function, or lasting damage. So while face slapping can be fun, if it happens to cause injury, it should be addressed. And although it may be embarrassing when you're speaking to your medical professionals, it is best that you actually tell them what was going on. And you were practicing consensual BDSM, both of you wanted this, and an accident happened, and this was the result. Now that we know the risks, let's talk about where to face slap so that we can avoid all of those. So the ideal target for a face slap is the fleshiest part of the cheek. And I have beard hair, so you can't necessarily see it all, but I'll turn my head a bit. You're trying to get below the cheekbone here. So this is my cheekbone, and above the jawline. So my beard covers it, but here's my jawline. And you're basically trying to avoid hitting the nose, the eyes, the ears, all those areas that we just talked about in the risks. So you're basically trying to hit right here in the fleshy part of the cheek. And since precision is key, you actually want to practice this. And I recommend starting light and close to the cheek. So you can hit that area, and then you can back away and get more forceful and a little further away to bring greater sting. With that in mind, let's dive a little further into this face slapping technique. The mechanics for this are relatively easy. You just seen me doing it. The challenge actually lies in precision and control. So the first tip for this is to use your forehand, not your backhand. And the reason for this is because the forehand, you can see, has more padding along all of these joints, where the back of your hand has your knuckles and all of these bones in your hand. And if you slap them with the back of your hand, you're more likely to cause an unintended injury to them or to you. Now, ideally, when you're slapping them, you're not actually slapping them with your whole hand. You just want to be using the padding of the top of your fingers up here. And ideally, most of the impact is going to hit on these two fingers here. And the reason for that is because one, it's going to keep your fingers more safe so you don't injure them. These are less secure. Your middle and ring finger actually kind of rest really nicely together, and it creates more surface area and security for your fingers. But the other reason is so that you're not hitting them here with your knuckles or at the base of your hand or your palm, because that's going to bring a lot more force to it and potential for, bringing in some of the pressure on those bones from your hand. So if we see this on my cheek, you can see when I demonstrate, I'm just using the edges of my fingers rather than like a full slap here. Because when I do a full slap, I'm more likely to make the edges of my fingers reach up towards my ear or my eardrum, or if I'm doing it this way, you can see it start to hit the base of the eyes. And then also the bottom of my hand is more likely to hit that jaw. Where if we're just doing this part here, I can hit that cheek really easily. The other thing that you want to do with your hand is keep it together, but relaxed. So this is sort of similar to when you're spanking. Basically allowing for a relaxed hand is going to allow nice recoil. And, but if the hand was stiff, like super hard stiff, it doesn't allow for much recoil and you're more likely to injure your hand. So mastering that technique is going to ensure a more controlled and pleasurable experience for both of you, while minimizing the chances of injury actually happening. So now that you know that, let's talk about putting it into practice. First off, remember your goal in the overall scene that you're doing and why you want to include face slapping. Because face slapping can be used in a variety of ways to create different effects. So face slapping can actually be used to build a little tension and anticipation. So you could be lightly rubbing their face, kind of moving your fingers on there, give them a few taps before you give a larger one. The other thing you can do is evoke fear in them. So you can hold their face with your one hand, bring your other hand very far out, like you're going to give them a very intense face slap, and then bring it in quickly and just stop short of their face. And then the other thing you can do is if they are getting lost in their head, in their thoughts, or they're getting very deeply immersed into their pleasure, you can kind of bring this intense shock to the scene really quickly by giving a really sudden and unexpected face slap. So you can see between these three different examples, each one is going to have a different effect, elicit a different emotion. So remember what type of scene you're trying to create and match your face slap with that mood, dynamic, and the desires of both of you. My next tip is to actually practice face slapping by doing spanking first. Now, this may seem a little counterintuitive, but practicing that slapping motion on a butt before moving to the face can really help you to gain mastery of your precision, of the intensity, and what it feels like for your slap to make contact on skin. The butt is far fleshier and can withstand greater impact with less risk, where if you're not very good with your precision yet, a misplaced face slap can cause a lot of risk and injury. My next tip is to basically remove any jewelry that you have, as this is going to increase the risk of injury. Now, I'll be honest, sometimes I forget this. I usually wear a lot of rings. But if you think about your ring, it's usually down here, and we don't want to be slapping with that area anyways. We want to be slapping more up here, but it's always better to be safer than sorry. Now, if your submissive has cheek piercings, like a little piercing that goes in the center there, or has lip piercings, you may want to have them take them out or do slapping on the opposite side of their piercing, just so that way it doesn't get caught and torn out. My next tip for putting this into practice is to start close to their face. So as I was mentioning earlier, you want to begin with light taps. And this isn't going to be really much of a slap, but it's going to basically train your brain of the area that you want to land, helping you practice with precision there. You can lightly tap and maybe miss a few times and hit their cheekbone or their jawbone and feel where that is. And then once you have more control and precision, you can now move to gradually taking your hand further out, 6 to 12 inches, but still being able to land in the same place. And at that distance, you can still deliver a very satisfying sting, depending on how much intensity you're delivering it with, but it's easy to maintain precision. Even 12 inches out, I can still hit the same area over and over again. Whereas if I was doing it out here, there's just much more room for you to misplace your slap. And if you're doing very hard ones, it can be nice to kind of rub the cheek. Same thing if you were doing spanking. A lot of times when I'm spanking, I'll give several slaps and then I'll give some nice rubs in between or kisses or whatever. Now, if your hand starts to hurt while you're doing this, if you're doing it repeatedly, you're probably doing it too hard. It's far better with face slapping to start too gently than to start too rough. As your technique improves and your partner expresses that they really, really enjoy it, you can gradually increase the amount of force that you're using while maintaining accuracy and avoiding injury. Now that you may notice as you get started that your submissive starts to anticipate when you're going to face slap them, and they might start to get tense or like flinch or try and pull away. Or a lot of times if people are going to expect a face slap coming, they try and lessen that sting because it hurts. And so they start to turn their head away. And the problem with this is if they are turning their head away while you're slapping them, now your hand is not going to this part of the cheek, but it's going to maybe land on the eardrum, the cheekbone, on the jaw, in places we don't want it landing. So to prevent this, you can basically place your hand on the other side of their face, or you can lightly cup their chin. I like this a little more. It feels a little more dominant to me because I have control of her face and be like, listen to me. And then I can slap her with the other hand. What this does is basically stabilize their head. So I know I'm going to make that without them turning away. And it's going to absorb some of the impact. Just make sure that you're not holding it too rigid and that you allow a little bit of head turn when you actually make that impact. So everything naturally goes through with that motion rather than resisting each other, which can lead to more injury. Now let's talk about some tips for the submissive that's being face slapped. The first tip is to close your mouth. Keeping your jaw closed minimizes that risk of dislocation. And this is really easy to do just by lightly bringing your teeth together or having a smile. But depending on who your dom is, smiling too much may evoke a little more face slaps. So proceed with caution. The other thing you can do is to close your eyes. So if your dominant is not requiring you to keep eye contact at the moment, closing your eyes can just make sure that they don't accidentally get hit or scratched. I also recommend not flinching. So anytime that you flinch, that you pull away, that you try and avoid that face slap, it increases the chances that it's going to land somewhere else than the dominant intended. And depending on your guys' dynamic and what you've negotiated, you flinching may actually evoke harder face slaps as a consequence for you for flinching. And then my last tip is when the face slap actually lands, to turn your head in the direction that the face slap is going. And this is going to basically allow that force to follow through, and the sting's not going to be as much. So those are my tips. Face slapping is really great to add into your rough play toolkit. Other things like hair pulling, choking, spanking, manhandling, and so on, which I've created videos for all of those. I'll leave links down below. And if you're curious about other things that you can learn as a dom, or where something like face slapping might fall in the intensity of being a dominant, I recommend checking out this video, which is basically a quick guide to becoming a sexually dominant man. It's going to lead you through different acts of different levels of intensity. You can pick out your favorites and go start learning them. So check out that video. And until next time, thank you so much for your time and attention.